Leave law school, I quit law school. I didn't even make it through a semester. I hated it. And of course, when you graduate with a degree in medieval history and philosophy, you are all dressed up with nowhere to go. So I went back to work doing full-time what I had done part-time to put myself through Stanford. I was a Kelly girl. Temporary office personnel. I typed and filed and answered the phones, and so after I quit law school, I went to the want ads, accepted the first job I was offered, which was to type and file and answer the phones for a 9. It's truly a beautiful slice of this country. And of course, corn is much more than beautiful here for this state, for your businesses, for your communities. It's not just fuel or food for livestock or sweet corn for people. It's really the center of so much. I have seen the agriculture industry almost destroyed in the state of California by bad policies and bad politics. And so I come to your industry with a keen appreciation of what bad politics and bad policies can mean. I have watched over the course of, I lived in California with my husband Frank while I was at Hewlett-Packard. We lived there for 12 years. And we have seen industry after industry after industry decimated. We are seeing the most productive agricultural land in the world in the Central Valley of California being destroyed by the Environmental Protection Agency's insistence on protecting fish over families, controlling water, and as you well know, the EPA now controls 95% of the water in the state of Iowa. I'm running for the presidency of the United States because I think we have come to a pivotal point. I'm keenly aware of the fact that my life is only possible here. I have traveled and lived and worked all over the world. And it is only in this country that a young woman can start out typing and filing and answering the phones in the middle of a very deep recession, go on eventually to become the chief executive of the largest technology company in the world, and run for the presidency of the United States. That's only possible here. And it's possible here because our founders built a nation on what was a very radical idea, really a radical idea. The idea was that here you had the right to fulfill your potential, to make the most of your God-given gifts. Their language for that was life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And they said, this was the radical part, that that right came from God and could not be taken away by man or government. I believe we have reached a pivotal point in this nation where the potential of too many Americans, indeed the potential of this nation and so many industries that build this nation, where the potential is being crushed by the weight, the power, the cost, the complexity, the ineptitude, and the corruption of the federal government of this nation. Here is the good news. You know, I have a lot of faith in the common sense and good judgment of people, because every time I ran to the problem, I'd find people who knew how to solve the problem. And I'd ask them and we'd solve it together. I have a lot of faith in the common sense and good judgment of you and your fellow citizens. And there's a lot of evidence to justify my faith. Today, 75% of the American people, as measured by Gallup, 75% of the American people now think the federal government is corrupt. That means Democrats and Republicans, young and old, men and women, doesn't matter who you are, you think the federal government is corrupt and acting against your interests, not for your interests. 82% of the American people think we now have a professional political class that is more concerned with the preservation of its own power, privilege, and position than on getting the people's work done. I agree. I think we need a very different kind of leadership now, because whatever your issue, whatever your cause, whatever festering problem you hope would be resolved by now, the political class has failed us. No one is willing to actually challenge the status quo in Washington, D.C. and roll back any of this. You ever notice nothing actually gets better? No department ever shrinks? So, I will close with one last thought, because I truly want to take your questions. One of my great heroes is Margaret Thatcher. Margaret Thatcher once said this: "I am not content to manage the decline of a great nation." Neither am I. You know what managers are? Managers are people who do the best they can within the status quo. They don't ever challenge the system, they operate within the system. I think we have been managing the decline of a great nation for far too long, Republicans and Democrats alike. I am prepared, with your help and your support and your prayers, I am prepared to lead the resurgence of this great nation, to unlock its potential by lifting the weight of the government, politics, and policies off of this great nation. Thank you so very much, ladies and gentlemen. Happy to take your questions.
Carly, I'll start the questions off, Carly. You mentioned ethanol earlier and the RFS, and as a head of a major corporation, you understand what it's like if government changes rules midstream.
Yep.
Congress and the White House made a commitment back in 2005 and 2007 to the renewable fuel standard. And in the last couple of years, they've decided to change the rules on us by changing the RVO numbers, lowering them. We're just here to ask you that, are you willing to commit to the full statute to 2022 of the RFS?
I am, but I'm also, in the spirit of complete honesty and transparency, I'm also going to tell you this. I don't think government should be in the business of setting prices and guaranteeing access to markets. I think government has to be even-handed. The reason I am prepared to commit to that through 2022 is because the government hasn't been even-handed. And other fuels have gotten a better deal, fossil fuels, et cetera. So I completely understand why the Corn Growers Association, why the people of Iowa, why your governor want to make sure that you get a level playing field. And that means committing to those standards through 2022, and I'm completely comfortable doing that. However, I also believe that by 2022, at the end of that period, government should get out of it all. Government shouldn't be giving certain fuels tax credits and access to markets in a way that's beneficial to one industry or another. Government shouldn't be setting prices. Government shouldn't be picking winners and losers. And so what I would say is, let us establish 2022 as the end point. Let's have a level playing field from now until 2022. But in 2022, the government needs to get out of all of this. Fossil fuels, corn, sugar subsidies, the government needs to get out of it all. Because when the government is engaged in markets, the government can corrupt markets.
Darrell?
If you have a
Can you go to
question,
the
could you
microphone,
please
please?
go to the mic?
So you're saying we need a level playing field. So if
Yes.
the oil subsidies have not gone away by 2022, will you still support the RFS extension? Or-
Yes, but if I'm president, they will. Everybody's got to play by the same rules. That's what I'm trying to say. Everyone has to play by the same rules. So renewables have to have the same rules as fossil fuels, the same advantages. But in the end, government shouldn't be setting the rules.
Mark?
Ms. Fiorina, I'm Mark Rector. I farm in northeast Iowa. And like everybody in here, and you're familiar with this too, we run our own business. We deal with taxes every day.
Yep.
It's 179, section 179, estate taxes, capital gains, it goes on and on.
Yep.
We deal with them every day. We have to analyze how they impact our business throughout the year so we can adjust going forward. Congress likes to take these issues up typically in December, usually after Christmas, and extend them or not extend them and play the game, same game every year.
Yep.
They talk about comprehensive tax reform.
How long have we been talking about that?
So what is your plan? What is your idea for stabilizing tax policy so we can plan for the future, not only with those, but also with estate tax, because many of us are looking on passing our farms on and businesses on the next generation, and questions concerning that also.
Well, it's a really important point, and it sort of makes my point about the professional political class. Honestly, how long have we been talking about tax reform? How long have we been hearing, oh, there's bipartisan appetite for comprehensive tax reform, and yet it never happens. Today we have a federal tax code that's 73,000 pages long. Now, why does that matter? Because when you have something that's so complicated and complex, what happens? The big, the powerful are advantaged. Complexity favors the big, because the big, the powerful, can hire all the accountants and lawyers and lobbyists necessary to make sure all that complexity works for them. That's called crony capitalism, ladies and gentlemen. And small, family-owned businesses are disadvantaged by this complexity. And of course, small and family-owned businesses and farms are the engine of economic growth in this country. They create 2/3 of the new jobs. They employ half the people. Most people start out like I did, in a little 9-person real estate firm or in a family-owned farm. My husband Frank started out driving a tow truck in a family-owned auto body shop. So all this government complexity and power and weight is doing what? It's advantaging the big, the powerful, the wealthy, and the well-connected, and it's crushing the small and the powerless. We are now destroying more small businesses and farms than we are creating them. That means less opportunity for everyone. Why do I start with that? Because 73,000 pages actually needs to be about 3 pages. It's got to be simple enough that anyone can understand it. It's got to be simple enough that you don't have to hire an accountant and a lawyer and a lobbyist to make sure you're not doing something wrong, or you know how to take care and take advantage of all these loopholes and tax deductions and credits. There are binders full of good ideas about how to reform the tax code, and yet nothing ever really happens. So my view is, if it's a flat tax, if it's a fair tax, my vision is this: 73,000 pages got to go to 3. And the only way to do that, honestly, is to start out with a blueprint that says you lower every rate and you close every loophole. You lower every rate, you close every loophole. The only way to level the playing field between big, powerful, wealthy, well-connected, and small and powerless is to simplify. Now, by the way, why is it that after all this discussion about bipartisan tax reform, it never happens? Because people are invested in the status quo. And there are loads of people who benefit from the status quo and all that complexity in the tax code. And every time you start to reform it, all those people come out of the woodwork and say, don't gore my ox. The truth is, we're going to have to gore everybody's ox at the same time to get any of this reform done. And so here's how I will ask for your help. Remember, I said I have great faith in the common sense and good judgment of the American people, and I do. Technology is a tool that I will use to ask people, what's the answer to this problem? Because you know, I'm going to ask every week. You know, the president has a weekly radio address. Every week I'm going to ask people to take out their smartphones. By the way, note, I have seen a lot of flip phones here in Iowa. I know you're cheap, but you're going to have to upgrade. You have 18 months to do it. I'm going to ask you to take out your smartphones. And I'm going to say, do you think we need to go from a 73,000 page tax code down to a 3-page tax code so anybody can understand it? Press 1 for yes, press 2 for no. This technology exists. People use it every day for silly, superficial things. I will use it every week to engage the American people in a conversation about how to solve these problems, because you know the answer.
Ms. Fiorina, honored to be in the same room with you, by the way.
Well, thank you. That's very nice of you to say.
Yes. What's your thoughts on fixing this train wreck that I'll call immigration?
The train wreck of?
Immigration.
Oh, immigration, okay.
Illegal immigration,
Yeah.
Specifically.
So here's another great example. You know, how many election cycles have we been talking about immigration? Okay, once again, we're talking about it. 2012, we talked about it. 2008, we talked about it. 2004, we talked about it. We've been talking about this for 25 years. And guess what? Has anything changed? No. For 25 years, we've been talking about the border being insecure. It still is. For 25 years, we've been talking about fixing the illegal immigration system. It's still broken. So apparently, we lack the leadership to actually translate words into actions. Look, we have a lot of fine public servants. We have a lot of fine politicians. But honestly speaking, the business of politics is words. What you need to think about is who has a track record of translating words into actions. So here is my immigration plan. First, we must actually secure the border. It's not rocket science to secure a border. But you know what it takes? It takes money, it takes manpower, it takes technology, and ultimately, apparently, what it really takes, and what we've been missing all along, is leadership and political willpower. Have you ever noticed, by the way, that the federal government, which spends more money every single year and has been spending more money every year for 50 years under Republicans and Democrats alike, have you ever noticed that the federal government never has enough money to do anything important? How is it possible, really ask yourself, how is it possible that the federal government spends more money every single year, and every time they're asked to do something important, secure the border, we need more money. Invest in our military, we need more money. Fix the roads and bridges, we need more money. Answer taxpayer questions on tax day, we need more money. Really? You can't run your business that way. The point is, we never prioritize how we spend the money, which is why we have to go to some version of zero-based budgeting, but that's another subject which we can come back to. Money, manpower, technology, political willpower. I have a track record of turning goals into results. We got to secure the border. Second, we have to fix the legal immigration system. It is contributing to our problem. It has been broken for 25 years. We have 16 different visa programs. Half of the people who came here legally and who were here illegally just overstayed a visa. Nobody checked. We hand out Mexican border crossing cards. We never find out whether the people went home again. How many of them do you suppose stay? We don't know. We don't have an employer verification system that works, so we can't make it mandatory. Of course, we should have a mandatory employer verification system. We should have an agricultural visa program that works. We don't. We never have. It isn't rocket science. We just have to fix it. This is the most sophisticated technological country on earth. Of course we can fix this. But again, what's been missing is leadership and political willpower to make it happen. And then finally, we need to decide what to do with the people who have come here illegally and stayed here illegally. And my own view is they do not earn a pathway to citizenship ever. Because I know too many people, many Hispanics among them, who have done it the right way, who have learned our history, who have raised their hand, who have taken the oath, who have worked hard to earn the privilege of citizenship. And I don't think you can say to those people, never mind. Maybe those people will earn a pathway to legal status. Maybe their children can become citizens someday. But this must be a nation of consequence and law as well. I will ask you to observe one more thing. Every political season, people start talking about the most complicated problem in this situation. They all go to what to do with the people who have come here and stayed here illegally. And we start talking about things like mass deportation and amending the Constitution, neither of which will ever happen and aren't a good solution to anything. But observe this. By going to the most complicated problem, what do we avoid doing every time? Solving the basic problem. Securing the border and fixing the legal immigration system. So I'm not going to get distracted by all this stuff out here until we get these basic steps done.
Chris?
Yes, sir.
This will be
Carly,
our-
Chris Edgington. I live in northern Iowa. Agriculture is phenomenal. We have the ability to produce, and we typically overproduce at an alarming rate. But we're not the only industry in the U.S. that's in that case. And we have a transportation problem. And I know you alluded to that a little bit in the answer to the last question. Our transportation system is decaying. It's falling apart. Right. And we continue to produce more and more that we need to export because the U.S. is a world economy driver and player. And so we've got things going in and things going out. And we need, as an industry, to fix the locks and dams in the transportation system or the railroads is probably beyond our reach because we need a cohesive energy that's working to bring it all together. What are your thoughts on the transportation issues that the U.S. faces?
Yeah. So, you know, when we get into, of course, rebuilding roads and bridges is one of the most fundamental responsibilities of the federal government. It actually is a federal government responsibility. And Despite the fact, as I said earlier, that the government spends more money every single year, they never have enough money to do what they're supposed to do. What we keep doing as a nation, what we allow our politicians to do year after year after year, is paper over the fundamental problem. And so yes, we'll say, let's raise the gas tax to pay for roads and bridges. That's not right, and we're not solving the fundamental problem. The fundamental problem is this, and it must be solved, because we can't just keep spending more money and tinkering away at the edges of these problems. That's called managing the decline of a great nation. The fundamental problem is this: we spend too much money in Washington, D.C., and we do not prioritize any of the money we spend. It is why we must go to some version of zero-based budgeting. Zero-based budgeting is a fancy word for every single dollar of your taxpayer money has to be justified in how it's spent by every agency every year. Perhaps you know how appropriations hearings actually work. We don't ever talk about the whole federal government budget. Never. Every agency goes before Congress once a year. It doesn't talk about spending. It doesn't